Okay, let's do this. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. We are interviewing Shu, who is a final year student at the National Film and Television School in London, and she has also developed the game Disconnected, which she will tell us more about in a second. Shu, welcome to the Game Anglia Network Talk.
Hi, everybody. I'm Xu. Yeah. So, should I introduce?
Yeah, tell us a bit about yourself, who you are, and what games you've developed so far.
yeah, as Chris already mentioned, I'm a final year student from the game design and development MA course at National Film and Television School. Actually, I have already finished the course and will graduate in January. I came from China, and before I came here, I have been an indie developer and developed and released two mobile games on Google Play. They are Memory Detective and Cat Bounce. I have also worked as a game designer in several studios, both big studio and small studio, before I became an indie developer. Yeah, yeah.
So that's really interesting. So when you decided to join the course and the NFTS, you already had quite a lot of games experience.
Yeah.
And how did you find coming back to university or going into university, especially in a different country?
It feel great. Yeah, actually, because I really, if there is something, my favorite thing is learning new stuff. So I really enjoy the time in the university, and even I already had some experience before I came here in this game industry. But there, I can feel there is still a lot of things I want to learn and I need to learn. Both technical stuff, coding, 3D art, this all these things I learned through this course, and also I made a lot of small games during this courses, which I cannot do if I didn't come here. Yeah.
So as a student, it's sometimes hard to balance your projects and your university life. How did you find that from your experience?
Actually, from my experience, because our university is a bit different from a comprehensive, very comprehensive university, but a small, we call it a small school, and it's we call it, it's, as its name is a film school. So it's a bit different as it's quite small. It's more the activity in the school is like more about films. We have cinema club every week to the school will play some films and also master classes about films. So actually, I learned a lot about storytelling from films in this school, and yeah, and so I spent some time like outside of game development, but majorly more on films and learned a lot of stuff. Yeah, uh, if you say this balance, I think the balance is more about you make a good schedule and make sure you know what you can achieve and make a good plan. Then you can have more spare time to not only focus on game development but also things outside of game development, and then you can get a lot of inspirations from them. Yeah.
So tell me about a bit about Disconnected, the game that we're going to be talking about. We already shared a bit of information with our members, but what's the best way that you tend to describe the game?
Disconnected is my final year project at NFTS, and it's a narrative documentary game. It makes the players experience the life of an autistic girl by different metaphorical game mechanics, together with real life interviews as voiceover. Yeah, that's how I will describe it.
Right. Let's have a quick look at the trailer, and then we'll come back to the development part of it.
my mum would collect me and I'd always have like a knee scrape or bruise or something. You have a different brain, and the brain that you have is just as good as everybody else's one.
I would be the person always falling over, not catching the ball, not being in the right place.
So suddenly, what's different about you that you're suddenly crying and really overwhelmed?
It's those kinds of moments where I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have jumped in, or they're looking at me like really odd, or I definitely have had that kind of moment where you see people talking and then you try and hear what they've said, and you go in with a topic and it's like you want to join the conversation, but then they kind of look. I hope like they did in the game, they walked away. Well, sometimes they just look at each other and then carry on their conversation without you.
You don't know what the picture on the puzzle is, it's just blank puzzle pieces. It's not right to make children feel bad for things like that they can't control.
Do you have any specific moment you can remember this just to overload your feeling?
Gosh. Yeah, I mean, I think just unfortunately very many of them.
If I was to leave a message, I would say just be yourself and don't worry about what other people think.
Right, so we've seen the trailer now. Tell us a bit about how this project came to be. What led you to start developing it?
The idea of disconnected actually started from my own experience as I think last year I found I have some signs of this autism and Asperger. I don't have the diagnosis now because it takes a long time to wait for the diagnosis. But I found myself have some because I read some articles on the internet. I found out, oh, that's me. Yes, it's describes a lot of things I feel confused about myself, and then I feel I want to express this. I want to other people to know more about this. I think it's important to raise the awareness about this autism spectrum, or we call it Asperger's, and also but the game is not only based on my own experience, because I also did quite a lot of research, because there are quite a lot of people they share their own experience on some YouTube videos, and there are also some documentaries and animations about autism and Asperger. This how this idea of this game came from. But also on the other side, the mechanics of this game is mostly inspired by the game Florence, because that game it used a very simple game mechanics, but it used them in a very clever way to make the game mechanics fit with the story very well. Yeah, that's inspired me a lot. And also, if you see the trailer, you will see the second level where the player makes the speech bubble is kind of you can tell it's inspired by the mechanics in Florence. And what I learned from Florence is that you can just start it. You can just start from very simple and basic game mechanic, but you just change a little bit to make it fit with the story and make it help to tell the story. Yeah, this how this idea and mechanic came from.
So I think it's really interesting that you decided to go for a lot of micro interactions and designing those micro interactions. Like you are balancing the character using the arrow keys, and then you're using the mouse in order to piece together the puzzle pieces for the speech bubble. And you mentioned that Florence was one of the inspirations for that. As a game designer myself, I'm quite curious about how you developed those. So you had your main body of research, you had your interviews and your own experience, and then you knew what you wanted to where you wanted the game to go. But how did you come up with the mechanics for each part of the game?
Oh, actually, it took quite a long time to the final result, and I kind of struggled a lot about this mechanics. At the beginning of the first level, you see the balance one. The first version of the design of it is quite different from what it is now. It's like, but the basic ideas I want to make a mechanic that the point is the comparison between the normal kids and the autistic kid. So I want to make let the player to play the normal kids firstly, and they feel always everything is just easy, and then finally there came the autistic girl, and I still let the player to control that kid. But then there will be a big contrast that you feel oh it's just simple, it's just something about jump. But when someone who has a different brains, there's something different in her brain, and thinks something that's very simple for other people can be very difficult for that person. That's the point. And then I just struggled a lot how to express this how to better express this in the mechanic, and did a lot of did a lot of prototypes, and finally I came out this idea that I let the player to use the mouse to control the balance of the autistic girl, and make it quite actually it's kind of adding an actual dimension into a platformer game, because normally platform you just use arrow key to move and use spacebar to jump. But when there is someone who has a big problem in their brain, it's not problem, it's just difference, and you need put in some actual effort, like you need to use your mouse to help her to keep the balance. Yes, like that.
And what about the speech bubbles? Was that how did the interviews that you had with the other people help lead towards that?
Actually, the speech bubble, the conversation part, the second level of this game is, you can tell, is kind of mostly inspired by Florence. That in that game is it shows when the two people, this, I don't know whether it's a spoiler, and when they get use no not get more no get to know more about each other, is the game become the conversation become easier, and then the speech bubble puzzle become easier. But in this game, it's like when the autistic girl, when she speaks in her own way, it's a bit easier, and it's represented by the chicken and the dog. And but when she found out people don't like her own way, but so she decided, oh, maybe I need to mimic how other people talk, and then it become quite difficult, and then it's the real speech bubble uh the chicken and the dog is a little bit challenging, but it's quite easy for most people. But the bubble one is suddenly become quite much more challenging and difficult. Actually, I already have this basic mechanic before I did the interview, and it's a good thing is uh, because I was worried about whether, because I already have the mechanic, and I showed the people I interviewed this mechanic, but they want to say something related to. I didn't make them to say something really related to the game. It just asks them some general question, and it's interesting that what they said is just a match with the game mechanic, and I think I didn't change much after the interview because they just work well together. Yeah.
And speaking of the interviews, how did you think to work with the charity that you worked with? How easy was it to organize the interviews, as well as a researcher and as a student? How did you decide to well, how did you organize your questions and your trains of thought in order to lead to the conclusions that you were hoping for?
I think the charity Autistica and Jake from Autistica help a lot about the organization about this interview, because one of the people I interview is my classmates, and I knew her has this autism, and then asked her whether she can do the interview for me, and she's very happy to do that. And the other three people all from I knew them from Autistica, so they are all autistic play ambassadors. So yeah, the charity helped a lot, and they provide the room. It's quite lucky that they have a well quiet meeting room in the basement of their building. So I use that room. It's very quiet because it's for this voiceover. It's quite important that the recording need to be very clean. So when I pull the recording as voiceover into the game, it won't drag the player out of the game. And also the good thing about this, because I'm in FTS, is a film school, and so that's I can get the equipment from the school, the sound recording department. uh, the tutor from the sound recording department also helped a lot. He make me, because I actually had no knowledge about this sound recording, and I have never done anything about a documentary or interview, and so I was worried about whether I can have very clean voice recording. But actually, the tutor, he's the head of the sound recording department. He made me feel confident that he said you just need to have the right recording equipment and kind of quiet room, and will be fine. And he helped me to uh, help me book the right. It's not the best sound recording equipment, but it's quite easy to use, and has, and as you can see, the result is very good. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the trailer is really great, and then the interviews themselves work very well together. One thing that I think is very interesting is, as you're working on something like a final year project or a dissertation, it's not just about the development, right? It's not just about producing the assets and play testing and making sure that the game plays right. It's also
Mm,
about the time, the deadline, the big deadline that you have to submit your
mm,
projects for the end of the year.
yeah.
And I am curious about how you organize your time between research and development and playtesting.
Actually, for Disconnected, I did most part quite a lot of research even before I started the project, because I found myself have this autism, and so I did a lot of research about that even before I studied this project. And it's also how this idea came out. It's based on all the research I did before the first design of the game. I think is for the research you need to, especially for this kind of game, because it's about autism, it's about Asperger, so you need to do a lot of research to make everything you put into the game is right. So research for this kind of game, I think is quite important. I even read some academic papers about this to make sure everything is not wrong. And yeah, but you cannot. I think you need to have a good schedule that make sure you won't spend too much time on research, because you can't just find, you never find everything. But once you feel confident that you got your idea, and you can just keep going. And I think for the deadline and something like that, the time management is very important. You are not only the developer and the designer of your project, you are also the producer of your project, and also a producer of your life. So I think make schedule, force yourself to make the schedule is very important. I will suggest to make both a big schedule and a small schedule. The big schedule, I mean, make is what you want to achieve, like for this month and next month, your kind of a big goal, and then make the small schedule is make a schedule of what you will your daily task for maybe next 2 weeks. You don't need to make a very detailed schedule for several weeks after this, but you need to have a detailed schedule maybe for the next week or next 2 weeks. And yeah, that's very important. And then you have this schedule, and you will know how much you can do. And during this time, because time is limited and you have the deadline, and also it's you need to keep in mind, and the scale of the project you need to keep it something. Don't make the scale go beyond what you can do within this time limit. Yeah, like for my game Disconnected, because the mechanic is quite challenging, and it's hard to it took really a long time to make the design right, because it's something that no one has done before, so it's very challenging to design the mechanic and also put in the voiceover right. So I can only make the game very short. So that's you need to keep in mind. You cannot get everything. So keep the skill well. Yes, important. Yeah.
Well, I always found it interesting after playing Florence. I thought that, hey, this is a game that you could do maybe in 6 months or a year. And then hearing the developers, they said that it took over 3 years to develop. And I was like, oh, okay. It's definitely
Yeah.
much more complicated than it looks.
Yeah.
How much time did you have, and what tools did you use to actually make the game? And can you talk a bit about the total length of your game in terms of how many levels you've had?
Total length. I mean, how long the game is? Yeah, the game is just normally most people will finish it in 10 minutes, just 10 minutes. But the development time is actually we started this project in March, and we finished this demo before EGX as in October, so it's around 7 months. 7 months is just 10 minutes. And the tools I use to develop it is Unity.
So you took those 6 months or 7 months, including the autistica research. You said you did a bit. You said you had already some of the research done.
Yeah.
But does that include what you've done with autistica and the interviews in those 6 or 7 months?
Yeah.
Okay. And how did you balance university as well as maybe things like social media and promotion of your game around the development? Did you have any other school projects around that time? How did that work for you?
I mean, other school projects.
Yeah, other university modules or assignments that you had to do.
Actually, our this second year, our final year is mostly focused on this final year project. The other thing we have is just a dissertation. So actually, I spend most of my time to work on the dissertation even after EGX. But it won't have enough time to work on it after EGX, because we need to submit it like maybe 1 month after EGX. So, but I did a lot of thinking before EGX about what I will put into my dissertation, because my dissertation, the good thing about this my dissertation is also about storytelling indie game, so it's kind of related to my game. So that's when I design the game, I was also thinking about what I'm going to write in my dissertation. Yeah, and also what's your other question? I forgot.
How did you balance things like university and the projects and development time with other things like applying for EGX, making sure that you had the marketing materials ready, social media promotion, and things like that?
Okay. I see. So there are kind of three things as other activities in the school, and also this project, and also the marketing. I think it's one the most important thing is your schedule. You make your schedule right, then you can keep yourself, follow your schedule, and then you can have more spare time to do something outside of game development, because you need to keep your mental health well, because you also, if you also work, you always work on this project, and sometimes you may get stuck, and if you can forget it to do some other things. Like in our university, because it's film school, sometimes I go to watch some films that in the school, and also sometimes play board games with my friends. We have games night about board game every week. Yeah, it's also something outside of game development may help you to break this. When you start on something, time you just forget it and do something else, and then you may come out new ideas. And also, the other thing is about marketing. Marketing is really, it's quite hard, and it's really time consuming, and it's something quite different from game development. Um, and I think I did quite a lot of marketing compared to my classmates, because most of the game students, they don't really like do marketing stuff. Because they came here to learn, they're more interested in the games, and they want to put more effort in game development. But actually, I think marketing is also important, especially if you want to continue the project as a commercial project after you graduate. So I think for marketing for my project, because I have limited energy and time, I need to develop the game and also need to do the marketing. So I only focus on Twitter. I didn't do like much something like Instagram or Facebook or Discord. So I chose, I think Twitter is the best way. So I just focus on Twitter. So it will save some time. Yeah.
And what was the reaction that you saw to your game? So you exhibited your game at EGX as part of the NFTS booth. Am I
Yeah.
correct? So that was to a degree taken care of by the university. You didn't need to worry about getting a booth, but you needed to worry about the poster and the marketing materials that were there. But in addition to that, you had people come and play it. And what were the results? You mentioned that you also did quite a bit of activity on Twitter for marketing the game. What were the results for that? What was the result of the marketing work?
Actually, the reaction from EGS is quite good, because there are it's surprised that there are a lot of people that when they when they saw the game, some people, there's one person, he said after he finished the game, he just sit there, and he even finished the credit scenes, and after that he just sit there, and he told me that I can feel he's shocked by the game, and very moved by the game. And he told me that when he saw the poster, the backdrop of the game, he saw that it's kind of what he said. He think it's a silly, simple game, because the graphic is quite simple, and he didn't expect it's really emotional. And yeah, it's what you can tell after when he finished the game. He just sit there and just stare at the screen. Is yeah. And also because I have I put some paper there if someone want to left a message, and there were quite a lot of people. They left some message, and they say it's very emotional, it's very touching, and also there were some people who are on the spectrum, on the autism spectrum. It's a relief for me that they felt the game represents them quite correct. They said it's correct, and they are very glad there are finally a game that can represent what they felt. And also some people who's neurotypical, who's not on the autism spectrum, when they finished, they also felt very moved by the game, and now they can understand people who are on the spectrum much better. Even some very young kids, maybe 6-year or 7-year old, and they can also, some of them can even understand, because some of them may have a friend or have a sister or brother who's on the spectrum. Yeah, and also I think the marketing on the Twitter works well. I didn't tweet very much. That's what I said. I want to make every tweet can be very effective, but I don't have much time to spend on it. So yeah, I just make sure I don't tweet very much, but I make sure every tweet has its own meaning on it, and some of them has very good reaction. Like there is one tweet I said about people always say that autistic people are not good at putting their self in other people's shoes. But have you ever put yourself in autistic people's shoes? And that one I think got the best reaction, and because as people, I think they feel is really people on spectrum feel is really related to that, and people who's not and feel, oh yeah, we need to, they feel, yeah, we need to, it's the purpose that's raising awareness of this. Yeah.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that you didn't necessarily have time to include everything that you wanted in the game. Uh, where do you see the game going, and where do you see yourself going after you finish university in January? Because you said you already graduated.
Yeah, actually, the plan for the game is because when I designed this game, there are like already 3 levels, but because it's quite challenging to make everything right, so I only finished 2 levels, and the third level is about the sensory overwhelming to autistic people, and that one is the design of that one is like a bullet hell game, because it's what it feels for autistic people when the sensory overwhelming or emotional overwhelming happens. Is I think yeah, in my imagination it can be quite interesting, and also I have some interview recordings that really match well with that mechanic. And also if I can continue this game, I want to make the story stronger, because now like the first level, the second level, they all kind of works well by themselves, but they didn't connect very well. They like some bits of just some bits, some separate bits of a whole story. I think it's more important to make the whole story like connected each level very well with the whole a good plan of the whole story, a structure, a well structured story. Yeah, if I can continue this project. Yeah, so I'm also for myself, I'm also looking for funding and investment for Disconnected. Haven't got any result yet, but I'm still looking for, yeah, that.
Okay. And one question actually is, you mentioned the importance of planning and properly scheduling your time. What type of tools do you use, and how do you think about any given day, weekday or weekend, or hours themselves?
I tried some software, but finally I went back to just Excel or Google. So how's it? Google Excel, Google uh yeah, Google Sheets, sorry. Google Sheets. Yeah. I just use Google Sheets because it's more flexible. I can do whatever I want, because if you use software, I tried something like Monday, but I feel I still prefer Excel and Google Sheets. Yes, that's easy, and you can, for Google Sheets you can also um, use it in different computers, whatever the operating system is, whether it's Mac or Windows. Yes, quite easy. Uh, and also, yeah, as I said before, I think you can have a big goal of each month, what you want to achieve for each month as your big goal, and also have some small task for every day. What you plan to finish this day, and maybe have that plan in 1 week or 2 weeks.
And do you think about your development time in addition or at the same time as your personal time, leisure time, or like time out and things like that? And do you plan that in Excel as well, or do you use Google Calendar or something like that?
Yeah. For my own life, I use Google Calendar. I think I use Google Calendar together with Google Sheet. Yeah. Also, I think for me, as because actually the problem for when you want to really you want to try put everything you can to try your best to put it into the game. You want to achieve the best as best as you can. Then sometimes you maybe for me maybe spend too much time on the development of the game. But I think it's actually important to have your some leisure time to for yourself. Yes, sometimes I may have a walk around this because I live in Beaconsfield, so it's there are quite a lot of hiking routes around here. Yes, then it make you like kind of forget about all the problems in your development. Yeah, which is good for your physical and mental health.
And I think lastly, what were the hardest parts of the development process? And if you had to go back, what would you do different?
I think the most challenging for this is still the game design part. Like for my game, is the development, the coding part, the technical part is not very hard because the mechanic itself is easy and the art style is quite simple. But the most challenging thing is just the design. How you it's easy when you know what the design is, then your development is not difficult, but it's just how to design it, how to make it both interesting and right, because you need to represent this autism, and also it need to be a very interesting game, and also need to be emotional, and it can't it need to be like for the first level it need to be challenging, but you cannot too difficult that you will push people away. This control of difficulty is very difficult. Yeah.
And lastly, do you have any advice for any students who might be in their final years and they're working on their dissertation or their final year projects? What advice would you have for them?
I think the first one still make sure you have your schedule well. You make a schedule, make a good schedule for yourself is very important. Otherwise, you will just lost the control on your life and lost the control on your project. This is the first thing. Make a schedule, and also keep the scale of your game, your project, uh, in within the control of within what you can control. Don't make the scale too big and make the scale small, but have more time to polish it and do playtest, because playtest can be very important. So you need to left time for playtest. So you always think, oh, I can do this, I can do that. But finally, when you finally go to do that, you find you don't have enough time. So keep the scale smaller than what you want to do actually, and also keep some time for things outside of game development, because you can also get some inspiration from something outside of game development. And also don't forget to keep yourself in your health, keep your health in good condition. Yeah, and also for if you need to like us, you need to do your project at the same time. You need to finish your dissertation. I think for me, it may be a good idea that you have your dissertation related to your final year project, and you can, when you think about the design of your project, you can also think about your dissertation. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Shu. It's been really, really great having you tonight on the Game Anglia Network Talk.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of your advice was something that I could have really benefited from when I was in university. So thank you for that as well, and congratulations on Disconnected. Is it available on Steam or any other platform?
On HLL.
Okay, cool.
It's free to download on HLL. Yeah.
I will post a link to that in the discussion. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in January at the next Game Anglia Network talk. Bye.
Cool. Bye.